select its own pastor and so forth down the road. And there's also so to me there's several considerations. There's a management consideration, there is a scriptural consideration, and also there's a pragmatic situation. And that is, you might have a senior pastor who does very well and is able to have 10 churches under him, and all these people came out of his church, so they don't mind pastoring the church under him. They don't mind getting weekly direction from him. They look to him as their pastor. But at some point, that senior pastor is going to get to the age or station in life that he can no longer directly supervise all those churches. Then what's going to happen? He will transition to another pastor in the mother church, but all those satellite campuses or daughter works or whatever you're going to call them, they're not going to have the same loyalty to the next guy. And as a practical matter, it's not going to work because they're going to see themselves as peers of whoever becomes the next pastor. So a pastor of a multi-campus church will be wise to plan that transition. Even if he doesn't see it happening while he's still active, there needs to be a long-range strategy that we're not just trying to keep 10 churches under one church forever. We're trying to develop them. And to me, the safeguard is, and I can speak as having started 16 daughter works, so I understand both sides. I understand what it's like to start a home mission church. I understand what it's like to be the senior pastor that wants to make sure of quality control and financial control and every other kind of control. But my safeguard was the UPCI. I mean, that's why we have the UPCI. And so what we would do is establish, I will let you go if you can demonstrate self-governing, self-supporting, self-propagating, and if you will meet the district board and affiliate with the UPCI. And the main point of affiliation is it has to be a UPCI pastor. So that was my safeguard, is plugging them into the structure of the UPCI. So that they always had to have a UPCI pastor. They would always be accountable. So, relationally, they would still be accountable to me, but organizationally, they would have another accountability. And I'm very glad now that I'm general superintendent, I can't keep up with all those. And generally, life tends to bring you to a point where the organizational structure is not perfect, but it's going to be more stable than the individual over a long period of time. Because no one human being can be all things to all people until the Lord comes. There's going to be some change somewhere in pastoral status, disability, age, death, etc., and you want to plug them into a larger structure while retaining the personal structure. So the daughter works that came out of our church, they would still look to me spiritually as their leader. If I still preach for them, I still counsel with them. Sometimes they ask my advice, sometimes I give my advice. But there is another accountability legally or organizationally through the UPCI. So I think all that is the best way to work. Now, let's say, but there is a legitimate desire of a senior pastor in a mother church to do their best to make sure their investment is worthwhile. So how do we do that? And so I'll just briefly run through the sample daughter work policy. Now, from a senior pastor's point of view, you're having to trust that minister, that he's going to be faithful. Of course, that minister has to trust a single senior pastor. And I remember one I talked to, he wasn't raised up in our church, but he came to our church, and then he later wanted to be a daughter work pastor. He says, well, Brother Bernard, if we start a daughter work where you're technically still in control, you're the senior pastor, how do I know? What's my safeguard? I say, well, it's trust. But I'm having to trust you just as much as you're having to trust me. I've spent years building up New Life Church in this area. New Life has name recognition, a brand, everything. And now I'm letting you be a daughter work of that. If you do something crazy, you could hurt everything I've done in the whole metro area. So I'm having to trust that you're going to be faithful to me, just like you're having to trust that I'm going to supervise and oversee you without micromanaging you or killing you. So, if we can't trust each other, we shouldn't be doing this. But if we're going to do this, there has to be a basis of trust. However, I have found you should put the basic things in writing for many reasons. For clarity, because people's memories change, because people's ideas change, things turn out differently than they expect, and you don't want to have hidden assumptions. You want to be clear. So I call this a sample daughter work policy. This was the template we used for the 16 churches. We made some modifications for different ones, but this is where we started from. And so, if you look on page 19, I'll go through the brief. So we identified the daughter work pastor, and we said he will be considered a minister of the mother church. I wanted him to still have his identity with the mother church. So when it came time for me to raise money for him or to get some kind of help for him, our church people would think of him and his family as part of our church. That's one of the benefits, instead of starting on your own, is starting as a mother church. And so, number two, they would remain members of our church and they would attend once a week. Now, sometimes as the daughter church gets a full range of services, this could be modified, or if they're at a great distance away, it could be modified. But especially in the beginning, I had them come once a week. That way they stayed plugged into the bigger church. Their family was still ministered to. As I mentioned a moment ago, the people of the church would look at them as belonging to our church and would be prone to support them. Accountability. And so I established that the daughter work pastor would report directly to me. Typically, we would have a weekly meeting or as needed, and we would go over what's going on. And again, this could be modified over time or due to circumstances. And of course, he would be considered a pastoral assistant. And for UPCI purposes, that's what it's considered. And then I outlined the responsibilities. I expected the daughter work pastor to conduct all the services, to get approval for any special services or guest speakers, to keep a record of all the visitors, to follow up, oversee the outreach, counsel and visit these daughter work members, organize, administrate, and I have here meet regularly with the senior pastor once a week or as designated by him, inform him of all important developments, and submit a weekly attendance report. This is very important. Attendance report, report of visitors. It's a means of accountability as well as helping to have good records from the very start. And then, as possible, serve the whole church and attend the ministers'